Hi everybody, and welcome to a special GZERO presentation. We are coming to you from ITU's AI for Good in Geneva, Switzerland. I'm Tony Maciulis, the Chief Content Officer of GZERO Media, and this event is part of our Global Stage series, which we produce in partnership with Microsoft. And those of you who follow the series, and thankfully there are a lot of you out there, know that we talk about AI quite a bit. We've tackled it from geopolitical competition, from jobs, from impact to the economy. Today, we're doing something slightly different. We're putting it into perspective that this rise of AI has really happened alongside a number of converging crises over the last 6 years, from pandemic to a dramatic spike in armed conflict to climate and natural disasters as well. And we're going to talk about how AI can be used as a tool if enough people have access to it, and how to make sure that happens safely. And I definitely have the right people here with me to talk about that. Brad Smith is Vice Chair and President of Microsoft. We've also got Annalena Baerbock, of course, President now of UN General Assembly, former Minister of Foreign Affairs in Germany. Amandeep Singh Gill, UN Undersecretary General, Special Envoy for Digital and Emerging Technologies, and Professor Celeste Saulo, Secretary General of the World Meteorological Organization. Thank you all for being here. I know this is going to be a really robust and relevant conversation. So, because the buzzword has been diffusion, and we've actually talked about this quite a bit here, I've looked at all the Microsoft reports and seen how it's become increasingly more nuanced. Let's first talk about access before we talk about these use cases. You've described something as divides within divides are emerging. What is the landscape right now?
Well, it's really interesting, and I think this week here in Geneva is an opportunity to focus on the differential rates of AI diffusion, its adoption, look at the divides that are emerging, think about the capacity that needs to be built in the governance systems that need to be built because they go together. But if you just start with the landscape and the divides, in the global north today, about 27% of the population is using generative AI. In the global south, it's 15. So 15, 27, that is a divide and it's growing. But interestingly, within the global north, you also see a divide, and that's between urban areas and rural areas. And there again, it's about the same differential. And it really shows, I think, the different building blocks that are needed to build AI capacity, whether it's connectivity, in some cases in the global south, electricity, a lot of it is digital skills. And it's also people's perspective, what they think they'll get out of it or not, how much confidence they have, how much trust they have in this technology. So it's a complex topic, and it's why we need this kind of forum to bring everyone together.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about trust as well, because some interesting patterns are emerging there. But first, this is a big week for AI in Geneva in general, and Amandeep, you were a key architect of the Global Digital Compact and the UN's response to AI as it was emerging, becoming what it is now. This week, also the Global Dialogue here in Geneva, which came out of the Digital Compact. It's been 2 years, that was 2024. Where are you seeing progress on these issues that Brad just raised? And what did you hear over the last couple of days that gives you your roadmap ahead on what still needs to be improved?
Right, so the first global dialogue on AI governance, it's the second day, 6th and 7th July here in Geneva. Now, this is coming out of the Global Digital Compact, is designed as the most inclusive platform for conversations, discussions on AI governance. 170 plus countries are here, 4,000 stakeholders, civil society, private sector, academia, independent scientists. And then, crucially, the dialogue is informed by scientific evidence. There's a lot of buzz around AI. There's some hype, there are some potential horror stories. So where do we find the right kind of sweet spot in terms of guidance for policymakers? So the Independent International Scientific Panel has released its first report, 40 independent scientists from around the world, chaired by Yoshua Bengio and Mare Ressa. And policymakers attending the dialogue have found that scientific evidence useful, helpful. The spark has been lit, but I think now we need to nurture this fire so that the policymakers act on this scientific evidence. One area where we are a little behind in terms of progress on the Global Digital Compact is capacity building for AI, for using AI in context, for leveraging it for the Sustainable Development Goals. The Secretary General has given a call for a global fund on AI, and a network of capacity development centers has been launched by some member states. But this is not enough, and Brad talked about the challenge. We need to bridge this divide. We need to leverage this technology and its exciting opportunities responsibly. And a start has been made, we need to build on that.
So just to pick up on that for a second, I've heard AI for the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. We are now realistically only a few years away from the end of that campaign, and you're saying there's capacity issues still. So how do you see at this point AI being able to scale quick enough to make an impact on the SDGs, or are we setting a whole new range of goals?
I think AI will not be able to impact the achievement of the SDGs target that much because we are not ready for it. You know, the compute capacity, the talent, the data sets, the kind of tuned models you need in context are simply not there. All of Africa has less than 1% of the data center capacity in the world, which is highly concentrated in the US and in China. So we need to act fast to build up the capacity around the world, the physical infrastructure, the data sets, the talent, and then we will start to see the benefits for the SDGs. For now, I think we'd better do the more traditional stuff, traditional digital technologies, and try and reach the SDGs goal by 2030. But the next paradigm, which will definitely come as transition continues at the United Nations, would have to be an AI-first paradigm for development.
Yeah. So, Madam President, if I may, you've sort of, as Joni Mitchell said, seen the world from both sides now. You've worked at high levels of the German government. You're now President of the General Assembly, by the way, in a very interesting year.
Hasn't been boring, yeah, for sure.
So congratulations on that. But so let's talk about from the member states' perspective. So how are they viewing this moment of digital transformation? Obviously, there are very deep conversations about reform happening. Some of that is at the secretariat level, but also it's across member states, right, and how they approach the UN. How do you see AI and digital needs ranking among their concerns, and what are you hearing from the member states?
The vast majority of member states is here. We heard it, more than 170 countries, which is not all of them. And as has been said, there are two key major powers who are currently the ones where most of the capacity is based, most of the companies is based, also the knowledge is based. But the vast majority of member states has said, if we want to deliver not only on the SDGs, but on all the promises of the United Nations, this technology has to be there for all. And all the member states agreed altogether 2 years ago, not only in the Global Digital Compact, but also in the Pact for the Future of leaving no one behind. So obviously, if we are seeing a new technology, which we have never seen before in this speed developing, we have to ensure that this is just access for everyone. And this is why these 2/3 of the countries worldwide are joining hands on exchanging knowledge of access. And if I may say, because I'm always trying to look at the good side of everything, even sometimes it's challenging, this is also a great opportunity to bridge the old divide of the so-called global north and global south. You mentioned that I come from Germany. But seeing the digital progress there, even in some areas, rural areas, internet access is not given the whole time. And having been to many places in Africa, for example, where they are just taking the next technology step without the steps in between. So this is also a huge chance for Africa. And it's no coincidence that some of the leaders on the African continent are really also the leaders for this 170 countries. Same goes for India, for example, with regard to global governance structures, also addressing the dangers. So this is really a huge chance for a new cross-regional alliance for forming this new governance structure, but also for delivering on the SDGs. If, and this is a big if, member states and leaders are stepping up, and also if they are joining forces with the private sector, because no one can handle this revolution alone.
Yeah, so Brad, that's an important point, just to come back to you for a second before I come to you, Professor. So another thing that I think has been very clear over the past 6 years, really since the conversations we had back in pandemic, is this increasing role of private sector in multilateral organizations and how they come to the table. So vis-a-vis what Annalena just said, what is Microsoft's approach in helping to expand that access equitably, and what role should it have as we move forward discussing governance?
Well, I would say two things. First, from a Microsoft perspective, we're obviously focused on investment, especially in things like capacity, infrastructure, connectivity. When we do that, we also invest in electricity, digital skilling. We cannot serve customers anywhere, including on a continent like Africa, unless we make those broad-based investments. And there is more private sector investment right now than traditionally there has been for infrastructure on a global basis. That's a good thing. Now, the challenge is you can't look to the private sector alone to do this, nor can you look to the public sector, nor can you look to the nonprofit sector. None of us are going to be able to do this alone. So it really takes this kind of collaboration. It means that as a company, we lean in, as we do, say, through our AI for Good lab for public sector or societal solutions. But I actually think what it really points to is the need for everybody to work together. And this is the type of venue that puts that on the table. And you even think about something like meteorology, what the UN has spearheaded, even to bring people in that category together so that we harness what we each do best and we close the gap on something like an early warning system and the like. These kinds of problems require getting everybody to work together.
So that's a great transition, Celeste, if I may. So it's interesting, you've pointed out many times the important statistic that 90% of disasters on the planet are weather related. So that makes this a great jumping off point, something that's basically universal. But to what extent have these new technologies been useful, and where are the gaps right now?
Okay, well, thank you very much for putting that context, and I think that we need to understand that the 90% of hazards that are originated by meteorology require from us a lot of efforts in that area. And I was very happy in the opening remarks because some of the examples that you highlighted, Annalena, related to the AI for Good were for flood forecasting, for example. So yes, AI, I would say, it's not already brought a revolution in the field of forecasting. And that is for sure. That the challenge we face is, of course, equity and how we bring that accessibility to the global south. But let me put one example, and I'm sorry to bring you to something very, I would say, is historic, but when I was a PhD student, it took me a week to simulate one-day forecast. And now with AI, you need only a couple of minutes to generate 3 or 4 days forecasts. That is really democratizing the access to forecasting. From hours and days to minutes or seconds. And it's not also about big machines. It's also that you can run that in your own device. So if we are able to really provide these systems and co-design with the developing world these new tools, we will be succeeding in the next phase.
May I jump in
Please,
on that one?
yes.
Because in my previous role, we started to work together with universities and also with companies on this forecast. And this, because always taxpayers ask, so where's our taxpayer money go for international institutions? But if we use now these technologies, we can send rescue teams of the UN or bilateral support teams, if we know an earthquake is coming or a flood is coming, to evacuate people, but also cows and whatever could be damaged days before. So we save a lot of money instead of repairing afterwards everything and saving life, the most noble thing. So this is really prevention at its best. And this is why this joint cooperation between the private sector, scientists, and governments is so important and actually in everybody's interest.
I should mention, we've also just been joined right now by Kamal, Kishore, who is the Special Representative of the UN Secretary General for Disaster Risk Reduction. Nice to meet you. Thanks for being here. And you came at exactly the right time. So we're talking about early warning systems, something that I know you know a lot about. So in my introductory remarks, I mentioned the horrific earthquakes in Venezuela. What could better early warning systems do in that situation? And where is the UN right now in terms of the recovery and the disaster response there?
So as far as the Venezuela earthquake is concerned, at the moment we do not have technology to produce early warning, but we can generate early alerts. When the earthquake has already happened, we can alert communities with some lead time. And I think that has enormous life-saving potential as well. But for hydrometeorological disasters such as cyclones and droughts and floods and flash floods and extreme heat, there is enormous potential that AI has for better early warning, reaching countries that have traditionally, historically been underserved. Right now, 128 countries have a multi-hazard early warning systems. That's 65%. I want it 100%. In the 21st century, there is no reason that it shouldn't be 100%. So I think the potential is there in terms of better forecasting and warning of those hazards, better communication of that, and all of that overlaid with a dynamic understanding of where people are who are exposed to these disasters and why they are vulnerable, where they are, why they are vulnerable, so that we are able to tailor the early warning specific to their needs. You know, what a farmer needs is not the same as some other profession needs. So I think early warning can really do two things. One is it can quickly expand coverage to achieve 100%, and two, it can do it with much greater speed, do it in places where the ground level data is either sparse or unreliable.
So I've heard, yes, please go ahead.
Because I think that is great that we have Kamal here. And speaking about early warnings for all, I think that the next step is that for all and in the tailoring, and AI in the tailoring arena, I think that can make a big difference. And that is something I wanted to highlight because we have seen that together.
Yeah, so let's talk about the for all. So I was just going to pick up on what Kamal said, and I've heard the Secretary General say this as well. These warning systems need to be 100% across the world. Well, what does that take? Are we talking about more technology, more money? What kind of investment? What is the delta here to bridge that? And I'm sure Brad will have something to say on that as well, but we'll start with you.
I think that you need three things. One is that there are some hazards which are occurring again and again, and there are parts of the world where forecast and warning is not being produced or disseminated, and that's what WMO works with, and national Met agencies. So I think we have to achieve 100% there. The second very important thing is that the information on what is going to happen must reach people in a format which is understandable, which is trusted, and which is actionable. Right now, cell broadcast technology, for example, is the gold standard on dissemination. Yet, less than 40 countries have implemented cell broadcast. Why? I think it has to be 100%. And the third is, there is no substitute to having local level preparedness. Unless there is local level preparedness, you know, any early warning system, with emphasis on system, means that there is somebody who receives the warning and has the resources, knowledge, and capacity to act on that. That makes the whole chain.
So let me ask about, and this is something you might have perspective on, but also Celeste. Let's talk about AI when it comes to early warnings. Are we talking about big AI, like data center AI? Or are we talking about small AI and potentially device-based applications?
Well, it can be both, but I look at almost three distinct scenarios. And what you really see is a combination of technologies and a combination of data sets. Go back to capacity building. With AI and with multiple data sets, we can see, for example, those areas in the country that are most prone to damage in a flash flood. We built out, together with the United Nations, a data set of where there is cell phone connectivity. And one can then see where there is no cell phone coverage today in an area that's prone to flash floods. That tells people in government and the private sector how important it is to add that connectivity well in advance. That's capacity building in advance. The second thing is predictive modeling, especially for the kinds of things where you can provide advance notice, often weather related, when you see the bad weather coming, or say a tsunami after there is an earthquake. AI helps us with that predictive modeling. Then you get that into the local community and you provide that advance notice. Or it could be heat waves as well, so that you can evacuate livestock, people, and the like. And the last is disaster response. And a huge aspect of that is identifying as quickly as possible where an earthquake or say a cyclone or a typhoon or a hurricane or a fire has damaged homes, has left people stranded. And the great thing about this, in part, is it can access satellite imagery. And we basically have satellites orbiting the Earth everywhere. You can task a satellite to go get more detailed photographs. And with AI, we now have the ability in, say, 2 to 4 hours to do what before would take anywhere from days to a week or longer to dispatch rescue teams to the right people. And that saves people's lives. That's what we've seen just in the last week in Venezuela. And so you see how all of these things come together. And so it's not one solution for everyone, but multiple solutions do reach everyone.
Just want to jump in. I think this is a great example of the distance we need to travel from exclusion to access, then access to capacity. And I'm not even speaking about sovereign capabilities. That's at the other end of the spectrum. So what Kamal was saying, you can have access to these tools, these services, some of this information, but if you don't have the capacity to act on it, then it's meaningless. I think this is the distance we need to travel with AI in many other domains as well: agriculture, health, environment, public services. And that's really for the next 18 to 24 months. If we can put a massive effort into that, then maybe we can move the needle on the 2030 goals. Otherwise, we'll have to wait for the next iteration.
Right, so actually I'm going to stay with you for a second, Amandeep, because I was about to come to you anyway on the issue of, we began by talking about AI in humanitarian situations, and obviously climate is a huge part of it, and weather, but there's an unprecedented amount of conflict right now on the planet, and obviously there are 100 million plus people who are displaced. So where are you seeing potential for AI in those humanitarian situations, and what are the also potential roadblocks?
I was in Rome just before coming to Geneva, and the humanitarian agencies based in Rome are already using AI for deduplicating beneficiaries, for managing their supply chains, for reaching those who need assistance the most. So there is potential that we are already realizing, and there is more potential that we can realize, especially as we go through the UNAT reform process. But I think there are challenges also. Our internal capacities, the resources that are available, the humanitarian resources are shrinking at this point, unfortunately. But then in the field, there are challenges around safety, protection, and the complexity of the mandate. So if someone is standing in a queue for food and takes food for 5 to 7 people, is it a large family, or is that food going to some fighters? So that data is potentially dual use. So if that data is not protected well, and unfortunately we already see some cases, it can actually get into the wrong hands and make the conflict situation worse.
What is the plan then to protect that data? I mean, what currently is being done? What can tech companies do? What can humanitarian organizations do to make sure that data, I get what you're saying, it's being collected, it could fall into the wrong hands. What are the protections for those organizations?
I mean, there is the Digital Emblem initiative, and maybe for your audience to appreciate this, we put the Red Cross emblem on ambulances. on field hospitals so that they are not attacked as military targets. So this is the digital equivalent of that. The ICRC has come out with this, and private sector partners are stepping in. Now, can we put that into every website, into every digital platform, database, etc.? And that's a challenge we can only do, as you were saying, Madam President, in partnership with the private sector. So that's an implementation race that we have to run. But sometimes this requires more than emblems, because these emblems may not be respected, unfortunately. So protection has to be made stronger.
And maybe to just broaden the picture and bring it back also to the challenges we are facing, because we discussed before, what can it do to deliver on the SDGs? I think we have to understand that AI is not a super weapon for all. And if we are not delivering on the basics, then it doesn't help that in theory we could reach everybody, but in practice, as have been mentioned, if in some areas you don't even have internet connection or not even telecommunication connection, the best AI won't help it. So delivering also on the basic promises of the SDGs, of technology transfer, and also even the bigger picture about the financial discussions we are having at the moment, civilian commitments, for example. And this is a challenging question and debate also among this 170 states of saying what happens to the technology transfer. Also in crisis areas where UNICEF could use also new tools of educating children. But if they don't even have a computer on the ground or access, it doesn't help. So I think this has to be very clear, especially for governments, but also companies which are committing, that they are also committing to the basic human rights standards, to the Pact for the Future of the UN, and as the International Committee of the Red Cross was mentioned, that they are committing to the basic international humanitarian rules we are having in times of conflicts. Because we can see, for example, the divide in different conflict zones as well. In Ukraine, where you have a huge coverage of internet accessibility, versus, for example, in Gaza, where you didn't have any access at all, what it also meant for UN agencies to deliver on the grounds, or whether even parties of conflict would agree to not attack civilian infrastructures, as they should not attack a hospital, but in these times also telecommunication lines. So I think this has to be reminded that it always goes hand in hand together, protecting the basic rules and working together on the new technologies.
I would like to add on this data discussion now, because of course we have sensitive data that we need to handle carefully, but we also have the data that is the basics for AI. And that should be shared, open and sustained in time. Otherwise we will end up with something that is completely detached from the reality. And I'm speaking concretely about data about risk, and share that data about meteorology, and we need more data, because if we are going to trust into the next generation of forecast system, early warnings and so on, we need more data than we have now. And that is a big gap, that going back to the first segment of our discussion, that's a big gap between the global north and the global south. And that is something we should be concerned about. Investing in data, investing in the science behind, underlying all these AI algorithms. Otherwise, we will be on the dark side of the moon, I would say. So
100%.
For me, that message is also important to convey today.
I think that's a great point, but so Celeste, how does one begin to collect that data, particularly from areas that perhaps aren't connected? Some of the areas, unfortunately, most impacted by climate change probably are the least connected. So
Exactly.
How do you begin to do that work?
Well, that's why we are trying to work along those lines to provide the proper databases to all. And we have initiatives to make sure that the least developed countries or the small island developing states do have the basic of meteorological and hydrological data to protect their population. And that will be not only for their benefit, but for the global benefit. So it's a delicate matter where we need to invest more, but we need also ownership by governments and member states, because in the end, it's not someone coming to your country and saying your meteorological data is important. It's about you as a country recognizing the importance of investing in that asset and data on risk and on everything. So I think that member states have a very strong role here, and the UN system has a role to accompany them and make sure that whatever data they have, it is of good quality, it is ingested into the global systems, it's shared for the benefit of all.
The other thing I think this just illustrates is that very few solutions are going to be found looking at AI off by itself.
Yeah.
It's in conjunction with other technologies and broader data sets. And when you think about something like weather, traditionally, a lot of the data came from terrestrially based radar stations. And if you look at the distribution of radar around the world, it's very much a first world technology, and it's not found in the global south. Once you have these advances in satellite technology, as we now do, once you have so many companies as well as governments with satellites orbiting the Earth, I think most people think of satellites capturing photographs, which they do. But they can capture methane emissions, carbon dioxide emissions, they can survey the terrain, there's infrared. All of a sudden you have all of these additional data sets, they become more global, and it goes to your point. This needs to be data that is available to the public. While at the same time, when we have personal information or other sensitive data, it's protected in a different way. So even data itself needs to be governed in a bifurcated manner.
We have just a couple of minutes remaining, but let me go back to Kamal for a second. Go ahead.
On the issue of data, I have to say that, Celeste just talked about weather and climate data. If you look at the current state of data on impact of disasters, it's really not good. In the last 8 months, we've had major disaster events, and I can't get disaggregated data on how many men and how many women died in a disaster. So I think it's really essential. My really plea is that while we work on AI and its applications, we have to make the dull and boring task of collecting and systematizing data really cool. How do we make it cool? It's really a challenge. It's been 11 years since the world adopted the Sendai framework. We have a framework for collecting data, and yet the data is really patchy, and no part of the world is an exception. It's happening everywhere.
We have to build these data commons in all these areas: disaster resilience, climate change resilient agriculture, health, environment. These will serve as global public goods and would allow us to really leverage AI for good. So that's really 100%. This is the task that we must devote ourselves to.
It also makes a fundamental point about data science. At the end of the process, it's all about great analytics, including using AI, but it starts with its collection in the first place, and then its preparation so that that analysis can be applied. And you're right, it's a lot of work, and it's not just the most advanced technology, it just starts with people being able to count things. On the ground, it may be a government agency that is working with victims and has that data, it needs to put it together.
Just very briefly, because I know we're about to wrap, but I said you're in an interesting year to have the presidency of the General Assembly. It is the year when a new Secretary General will also be selected. So where does AI fall on the list of priorities, and what are you hoping to hear from the candidates about their approach to AI?
That they continue what has been started, because Antonio Guterres, the current SG, made it to one of the priorities, underlining that in a globalized world, we have to face not only the challenges from the past, but also the chances and challenges of the future together. And I was reminding also here at this summit, because there are some out there saying the UN should have nothing to do with it, that even the founders of the United Nations in the Charter underline that in global issues, which touch economic, social, and especially peace and security matters, the world should work together. And the founders back then, 80 years, they didn't know about AI, they didn't even have a computer. Yet they understood that transnational issues belong to an international international global platform, and this is United Nations, and this is why it has to be one of the key focus point. However, and this is a big however, the UN only works by its member states. So if member states, and this is head of governments, are not engaging in the issue of collecting data, so this has to be top priority for every national government as well, not only to engage in the governance structures, but also in providing the access, the resources, the cables for internet in arid areas, and also enabling that we can join forces in it. And this is individual leadership, so it's for the next SG, her leadership, but also with every head of states, his or her leadership to embrace this global issue together.
Annalena, thank you so much, Brad, Amandeep, Celeste, Kamal. It's been great to talk to all of you, and thanks to all of you for watching. Once again, this has been a Global Stage presentation from GZERO Media, and you can see all of our coverage of the AI for Good Summit and all of Global Stage coverage throughout the year by heading to gzeromedia.com/global stage. For all of us here in Geneva, thanks for watching.